How's it going, everybody? This is the Nitty Gritty. My name is Chad. With me, as usual, is Leonard. We are back with you this week with a new show. And our topic this week is going to be on the tag team, the Public Enemy. Not their entire career, but specifically their brief stint in the WWE. Now, before we get to that, just a brief overview. Obviously, Public Enemy consists of Rocco Rock and Johnny Grunge, and they got their start in 1993 in Eastern and then Extreme Championship Wrestling. That is obviously what they're most known for, although they had runs in WCW and, of course, what we're going to talk about, WWF, WWE. So, Leonard, did you know about them before they got to WWE or not?
Well, they came along when I was in college, and we talked about this before about how where we were both at, we really didn't get ECW, or if we did, it was like at 1 a.m. on a Saturday.
Right.
And I'm not sure when I really became aware of Public Enemy. It was probably during their WCW stint. And I should say that this topic was suggested by my buddy Ronnie, who I think has suggested probably more than half our topics at this point. And I wasn't really, and at the period they were in WWE, which was early '99, I wasn't really watching a whole lot. It was like I had it on the background, or I would catch it if I was over at a friend's house, that type of thing. So I don't really remember them being in the WWF, but again, it was only like about 2 months.
I was going to say, and you miss it type situation.
Yeah. If you were busy doing something, or you lost track for a minute. Yeah. But as far as Public Enemy overall, to me, they always felt like a combination of the Nasty Boys and the Dudley Boys. Because
Right.
they were these two big, fat, sloppy dudes who were like loud and obnoxious. But I associated them with ECW and more of that style.
Right.
So I can't say I was ever really a fan of them. I'm aware of them. I've seen probably, if what I've seen of them has been the WCW stuff.
Right. Now, I would probably say the same thing. There are a handful of matches that I had seen of theirs, and it's because of other people that they're with or against that is the reason I'm checking out the match, whoever that may
Right.
be. I can't really say I've ever sought out a match just because of them, except for maybe one that we're going to talk about. But we'll get there. So before we get to their WWE stint, we need to kind of preface it with what led to this jump. And so at ECW's house party 1999 on January 16th, they made a return to the ECW arena and answered a challenge of the Dudley Boys. At the time, they were still under contract with WCW, but they had a fight with the Dudleys, and then following this showdown, Johnny Grunge grabbed the microphone and claimed that the past 3 years had been a roller coaster ride for the team, and that if you opened up our chest and looked at our hearts, there's only one thing stamped on it, and that's ECW. And so Grunge thanked the Dudleys for house sitting the house that the Public Enemy built while they were gone, and then invited everybody in attendance to join them for a post-ring celebration. And then at their next scheduled appearance was supposed to be Crossing the Line 1999 on February 12th in Queens against the Dudleys, but they canceled it due to negotiating with the WWF. And they were buried on that edition of ECW Hardcore TV as being cowards who ran from a fight. And then footage of the Dudleys hitting moves on them, I guess, was aired in an event in Detroit with a headline saying, "Breaking news, the Dudleys destroy Public Enemy." So they were ECW through and through until WWF came knocking. And so,
Yeah. Well, I watched,
go ahead.
Just to say, I watched an interview with Bubba Ray today. Well, it was Bubba and Devon, but Bubba did most of the talking, where they were asked about that. And according to them, it was that they were asked to come back, and Paul had asked the Dudleys, "Hey, do you want to work with Public Enemy?" And they said, "Sure," because that was about the only thing they hadn't done. Public Enemy being the premier team right before them.
Right.
And apparently, when they first came back, everything was cool, and the Dudleys did the job to them to set up the rematch, which would be the job back. And Public Enemy was like, "No, we don't want to do that." So that might coincide some with the negotiations, but Bubba was talking more from the frame of reference of them basically bailing on the agreement that they had, and that they didn't want to do the job back. And as we go and talk more about their WWF stint, we'll find that according to some people, they seem like they were a difficult team to work with.
Right. And, this choice of, kind of breaking the deal. I mean, obviously, I couldn't find a lot of information from them about some of these situations, but them breaking this deal would not really help their reputation. It would put it in a different light, a bad light going forward. Right. So in early 1999, they did sign with the World Wrestling Federation, and they were not accepted backstage by some of the veteran talent. And there was a lot of animosity over the fact that they had been in WCW over WWF when the two companies were, I guess, both pursuing the tag team in 95. So Rocco Rock was also forced to change his name at this point because WWF obviously had The Rock. So nobody's going to be taking the name from The Rock. So he went then by Flyboy Rocco, which certainly is a demotion name-wise. Wouldn't you agree, Leonard?
I would say so. And on the matches and segments I watched, most of the time they were calling him Flyboy Rocco Rock. They were still using the full name on everything that I was watching today. So
right. So they made their debut on February 22nd, 1999, episode of Raw's War, and they defeated the Brood by disqualification. And they only lasted 2 months in the WWF. And obviously, this is a topic because their most notable appearance was on Sunday Night Heat against the Acolytes, obviously also known as the APA, which is Farouk and Bradshaw. And it led to their release. And so this match I've watched many times now. It was a 4-minute destruction of a tag team. It is really, there's no blood, but it's brutal to watch. It really, really is, especially, knowing what we know about CTE and, some of the things that these talent have to live with long after they're done. Now, recently, we had already talked about doing this as a topic, you and I, but it just so happened that in the midst of us talking about this, the APA had a special on the WWE Network, their Untold series. And of course, they mentioned this. And so basically, from their side of things, what happened was there was supposed to be a finish where Public Enemy went through a table. And at the last minute, before they went out to do this match, Public Enemy said, "We're taking the table spot out." This did not go over well with the Acolytes, and take into the fact that they're known for breaking deals and known for being kind of, prima donnas and going into business for themselves. And so Farouk and Bradshaw, you can watch the clip, like they march down to the ring and it's not a match. They just beat the living hell out of these guys. I mean, to me, more so Bradshaw than Farouk. Now, Farouk is not anybody that you would want to get on his bad side, certainly. But if you look at Bradshaw in this, like, he is just going to town on these guys with vicious chair shots. And having said that, though, the worst moment for me, and you tell me what you think, is at the end, after the bell had already rung, Farouk does his move at the time, which you didn't see much. It was called the Dominator. And
it was a reverse body slam, which is very awkward. Yeah.
Right. Well, it was awkward a lot. Now, he did it to Flyboy Rocco, who's not a small man, and the commentators even mention it, like he was just a hair away from breaking that dude's neck. It is so close. Like, if you watch it, it makes you cringe because of how close it was to being an absolute disaster. But so, Leonard, when did you see this match or hear about it? Did you hear about it after it aired or many years after?
When we got ready to do this. As I said, I had zero knowledge of Public Enemy being in WWF. I had not heard of this before until I started to prepare and I watched the match.
So how much of a surprise was this?
This was when I first started watching. So first of all, you're right. It's with entrances, everything. It's a hair over about 4 minutes, but it feels like a half hour. Like it feels like the longest beating in the world.
Yeah.
And when they start in on it, I'm like, oh, they're working stiff. Well, they work stiff anyway. Damn, they're working stiff. Oh, they don't like these guys.
Right.
Oh no. Like this is my reaction as I'm watching the match. And yeah, the thing is, I watched the Untold as well, and I also watched a segment of Bruce Pritchard's podcast where he talked about the incident. And what Bruce says matches exactly what Bradshaw and Simmons say. Now, that doesn't mean it's 100% true, but you've got two different sources saying the same thing. Was that the table spot was supposed to be the finish, and they said, no, we're not going to do it. And apparently Ron Simmons said, well, if they don't want to go through the table, we'll take the table to them. And you do notice there is a table spot in the match. And then Farouk just starts beating the crap out of him with the segment of the table.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've ever seen that. I don't know if I've ever seen a guy take a broken table and then start whacking a guy with the broken table. And then Bradshaw wears out a steel chair. The chair is, by the end of the whole thing, the chair is almost bent in half on itself.
Yeah.
Because he was just slamming it so hard. I was saying, mention too, from what Ron Simmons was saying, was they showed up late as well, and everything just seemed to play into the fact that nobody liked them backstage.
Right. Yeah, I forgot to mention that they were late that day. Yeah.
Yeah, so they were late. They didn't want to do the planned finish, and that was just too much. And especially a guy like Ron Simmons. At this point, it seems like, whatever Ron said, Bradshaw was along for the ride. So if Ron says, we're going to beat the shit out of these dudes and put them through a table, then Bradshaw's like, that's what we're going to do. So, and that seemed like what it was. But yeah, it is especially when I really didn't know what was coming, it was a really unsettling thing to watch.
Right.
And the crowd reaction, and that's one thing I was going to say, because I watched several, I think it was 4 total matches I found on the network of Public Enemy in WWE. Of course, there was a lot more from ECW, WCW. But like the crowd was dead for most of those matches.
Right.
And Bruce Pritchard said on his podcast that they were not getting over. And it did not seem like they were over. And I would probably put that to the fact that the WWF audience was different than ECW or WCW audience.
Sure.
And the fact that it didn't seem like WWF was really committed to pushing them a whole lot. But no, they didn't seem like they were very over. And the crowd reactions were dead for them, except for this match, because every shot they took, the crowd, you could hear them. That was a juiced crowd watching the beating that
knew what was going on to a certain extent, I think.
Yeah, I think they figured it out very quickly what the deal was. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you mentioned Bruce Pritchard's Something to Wrestle With clip, which is also on YouTube, and I'm gonna comment on that now, and I'm gonna sound like I'm devil's advocate for a second, but it's only to kind of bring another perspective of it. So, he was asked by Conrad, what happened after they got back through the curtain, and he said that Farouk and Bradshaw were ready for whatever was going to come, but Public Enemy walked right up to him, shook their hands, and said, thank you very much. And that apparently was still, even though they took it and dealt with it, that apparently was still frowned upon, because they were willing to dish it out, but, not take it. And apparently it was back when a time when they were still letting the boys police themselves, as he says in the clip. And that Vince was kind of done with him after this too. And look, obviously I didn't work with the Public Enemy. I've never been a wrestler, but so I don't know how hard they were to work with or talk to, but it seems to me that there were other options that could have been taken here, like, conversations before, let's beat the hell out of these guys with chairs and tables. Obviously it's a different business and this is what happens, but to beat the crap out of them and then say, well, they're not getting over, I'm done with them now. It's like, I don't know. To me, it was a little, the whole package put together was a little excessive to me. But, again, I don't know how they were. Maybe they, obviously to a certain extent, they had something coming. But, not only are you going to get the crap beat out of you, don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out. It's what do you think? Do you think that that this was entirely justified, or what do you think?
Well, not being there, it's a little hard to
Right.
say. Again, we just know the stories that we're getting, and it seems like all the stories link up, not only in this specific incident, but how they were to work with from other people like the Dudley Boys. So yeah, I think you're right. Maybe they had something coming, and it was a different business even back then, some 20 years ago, where you're going to work it out in the ring and work it out in a different way.
Right.
And even though this match may have led to them leaving the company, it wasn't the last match they had, because I don't know if you watched it, but I would like to talk about, I don't know if it's their final match that they had, but it was on the March 15th Raw against Owen, Hart, and Jeff Jarrett. And at this point, they had actually worked into their storyline the fact that nobody liked them in the back.
Right.
Because they had come from another company. And that's all they say. They say they came from that other company or another company. They never say what it is. And at one point, Jerry Lawler in commentary says something about extreme crap. Yeah, they came from extremely crappy wrestling and from that other place too, or something like that, that hints.
Right.
I don't remember what his exact wording was. But that was the storyline, that everyone hated them. And in this match, it's very interesting, the fact that I can't remember which member of the Public Enemy it is now, is working with Owen and is working him over in the corner, and the referee, who I believe was Jimmy Corderas, was pulling him off, and then Jeff Jarrett smashes him with a guitar, and Owen makes a pin, and the ref counts it. And this is also the point where JR was doing the heel shtick on commentary, where he had his own table with Dr. Death Steve Williams standing beside him. And so, he was like, well, that seems like that should be DQ. That seems like that should be a disqualification. And it wasn't. So, I mean, that seems like an even more nail in the coffin than what happened with the APA, that you specifically, not only you don't win by DQ, you lose by pinfall after getting smashed in the head with a guitar.
They were just doomed out of the gate, it seems to me.
Yeah.
And they didn't do themselves any favors, obviously, but
no. And let me say too, like I said, I watched that match. I watched the APA, the debut that we mentioned from Raw, which is February 22nd. Right. And then the only other match on the network was against the Hardy Boys from Heat on February 28th. And what I found was interesting is they put Matt Hardy through a table and the match continues. I'm like, isn't that a DQ? Putting someone through a table, shouldn't it, when it's not a tables match? And again, I didn't watch any other Public Enemy stuff to get ready for today, because we were talking specifically about them in WWF. Of course, I've seen other Public Enemy stuff.
Right.
But of these matches that I've watched, they were all about the same 4-minute match of brawling to start with. The other team does some stuff, Public Enemy gets their shit in, and then either they win or something happens and they lose. But it was all about the same match.
I don't think that their style was able to be molded to the WWF style very well. Whereas the Dudleys were able to do that really well. Obviously, they can kind of mold themselves to any style. And so obviously, even though I was playing devil's advocate before, they didn't get over, and it wasn't working out. And I'm sure that some of the environment and some of the treatment that was going on in the ring probably didn't get them overly motivated to want to stay. I could be wrong about that, but hey, I mean, if you're getting the crap beat out of you all the time, and it can't really endear you to the locker room. So let's just go over some of the other things that we found in our research here. They're also, even though this isn't mentioned in Untold with APA, that Bradshaw has also said that the fact that they were brought into the company by Terry Taylor did not do them any favors. He had his own backstage issues with most of the wrestlers. And as we said in a previous episode, Terrence Taylor was very well known to being a person that talked to Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer a lot. And I mean, I've heard a lot of different stuff about how he was backstage. So let's just say he wasn't a fan of not everybody loved him. So that also could have led to it. So because they wanted to change the finish of the match, the Acolytes did what they did, and it turned into a shoot, as we discussed. And so they wrestled. Their final time was on March 30th, 1999, in a match taped for Shotgun Saturday Night, and they lost to the Hardy Boys via disqualification. And I guess that match was aired on television on April 10th, 1999. But shortly after airing, both members were released in mid-April, along with Dr. Death at the same time, and Bart Gunn and LOD 2000. So,
it's an interesting class to get cut.
Right. So they were released with a lot of different people. So, yeah, I mean, they like you said it earlier, and I didn't even think about it, but it makes perfect sense in that they're kind of a mix of the Nasty Boys and the Dudley Boys, and it's one of those situations where you want one or the other. They are the mayo chup of wrestling. You know, you either want mayonnaise or you want ketchup.
But you're gonna get both.
But if you want both, you want them both separately, or both on their own. Yeah. You don't want to buy mayo chup.
Yes, mayo's on the top bun, ketchup's on the bottom bun, maybe.
I hope we get comments from people that love mayo chup.
Yes. And Cranch.
That's kind of how I look at it. Like, they had some fun matches with various tag teams, but I don't know why they would have gone into WWF with an attitude that we can do what we want. I really don't understand that. How they had that mindset is kind of head scratching.
Yeah, well, that's how you compare and you contrast the Dudleys, because you mentioned the Dudleys were able to work their style, work a different style depending on who they're working with. It seemed like they got along better with different people. And I read one thing that said that there was like the idea became the APA litmus test. Could you get over in a feud with the APA? Because the Public Enemy didn't, but the Dudley Boys did. I don't think that has zero to do with the APA. It has everything to do with who they were working with.
Right.
All the issues that we talked about with Public Enemy, but the fact that the Dudley Boys wanted to get over, wanted to do well, wanted to assimilate. And in watching interviews, and I haven't watched a lot of different, like shoot interviews or whatever with Public Enemy. I don't know if there's a lot out there, but the Dudleys come across as being very smart to the business and knowing what they needed to do, and just come off as very competent and good guys to work with. So I think that says a lot more about the Dudley Boys versus Public Enemy than it has anything to do with who can and can't get over with the APA specifically.
Right. Well, yeah, and after this, they would briefly return to WCW, and they would make an appearance on ECW on TNN when that show was around. And sadly, we lost both members of the Public Enemy. Ted Petty, who was Rocco Rock, died in 2002. And 2006, Johnny Grunge, real name Mike Durham, also passed away. And it's obviously sad when you lose people that young, but they certainly made their mark on the wrestling business despite this little unfortunate incident in WWF. And they have, I'm sure, still a lot of fans out there. So any final thoughts on their run in WWF? Do you think it should have lasted longer, or do you think that it wasn't meant to be? I would probably lean more on the latter, but what do you think?
Yeah, in the end, you just have to ask yourself this: how would things have been different if the Public Enemy had held on longer in WWE? First, would the WWE been better off? Probably not, considering how much talent they had. It's not like the Public Enemy would make a huge difference in the grand scheme of things for them.
And in '99, they had a ton of talent.
Yeah, and a ton of different
tag teams. Grow into 2000 when they would have, and then onward when WCW would fold. So
yeah, and then the other thing you asked is, would the Public Enemy be better off? Well, probably in the way of more money and maybe a little more notoriety, but it's hard to think they would have been given any sort of major feuds or significant title runs if they had stayed on. They probably would just been in a jobber category. The only thing I think is really, really interesting to consider is if they would have wound up in the first TLC match instead of one of the other teams, or maybe as a 5-way match. Who knows? Because of course, doing those types of spots was something they were known for. That's the only thing that I would find really curious, if they would have found themselves involved in that, which is considered, one of the best matches of all time of that.
How crazy would it be if they were? The match probably wouldn't have been the same. And knowing
how
they are about spots, who knows what they would have wanted in.
Yeah, what they would have done to others, or what they would have not done, have done to them, etc. So that's interesting to think about. So, at the end of the day, I think everyone figured out this wasn't working. I think Public Enemy knew it wasn't working. I think everyone on WWF side knew that it wasn't working. And I tell you, I've had plenty of friends start a new job and say, "Hey, this is the best thing ever." And 2 to 3 months later, they're looking for another job, or they found another job.
Oh yeah,
because
absolutely.
It's not what they thought it was when they got there, or sometimes the employer, or both, wasn't getting what they thought they were getting when they hired this person. And that's not good or bad on either way. It's just, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And I think maybe at the end of the day, that's kind of a little bit of what it was. It wasn't what Public Enemy thought it was going to be. They weren't what WWE thought they were getting. And again, with everything, with their attitude, with the fact that maybe they were considered Terry Taylor guys, and everyone in the back was not a fan of the computerized man of the 1990s. So it was just one of those perfect storms. It feels like one of those perfect storms of just, this isn't going to work on from a multitude of different perspectives.
I don't think anybody's going to be buying that shirt. I'm a Terry Taylor guy. I'm just a guess. I could be wrong. Or it could be, I'm a computerized man of the 90s guy.
Yeah. If we ever get big enough that we have like shirts over at WrestlingTees.com, I'm a Terry Taylor guy should be one of our shirts.
Absolutely.
Or I'm a Terrence Taylor guy. I think it should be I'm a Terrence Taylor guy.
I'm okay with that one.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you were saying, some jobs, it's just not a good fit, right? Not every job. And I'm sure if they were around to comment on it, I'm sure that they would say something along the same lines.
I'm not sure. And let me say, if any of you know of an interview that they did where they talked about it, please link that in the comments. Because again, I just did. It was one of those things I usually put in what topic we are, and I see the videos. I'm just kind of watching, right? But I didn't really come across anything of
I didn't see
talking about it. Yeah. Other people, like we talked about Bruce Pritchard, APA, Dudley's talking about working with them in general, but yeah, nothing from their side of things.
Right. Well, we thank you for joining us this week. For Leonard, my name is Chad. Please check out my other show, Dailies to Downloads. As Leonard said, please comment, let us know what you think, and like this video, subscribe to our channel. We have new episodes every week. We thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.